Today is Friday, March 27th, and I'm really excited about episode 3 of these video podcasts, especially as we are confined to our homes and staying home and finding different ways to be and stay connected. I have a special treat for you today. I've got a special guest I'm going to introduce in just a minute. But before I do that, I just want to encourage you once again to subscribe to our YouTube channels. This is more for your benefit so that as things get posted, you can get alerts. They're easier for you to access. So again, find PLC Church SD, PLC Church SD, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. These podcasts are just my way of doing what I can to help us be and stay connected to one another. And I want to connect us back today to a time in our congregation's history where we had an associate worship leader alongside Paul Schwapak. My guest today for this podcast is Wesley Berger. Many of you will remember Wesley, and if you've never met Wesley, you will see why he endeared himself so well to our congregation as he led us in worship. He also wrote a song for us right after Easter that has been a part of our repertoire for the last couple of years. And I spent this episode catching up with Wesley. It went a little longer than we had planned. That's not going to be any surprise to any of you, but I really believe that you're going to be blessed by this today. So you're going to want to find some time just to sit and enjoy it. Wesley's heart really comes out in this interview. A lot of what he's been doing since he's left PLC. He left in July of 2018 when his wife got out of the Marine Corps and they transitioned back to where they're from in the Midwest. So I catch up with Wesley. We hear a lot about what he's doing, and he tells us more about his most current project. He's released an EP, several worship songs on an EP album called The Art of You. So please join me in welcoming Wesley Berger. And I know you can't clap right now, but you might as well just take the opportunity to clap. But would you please enjoy this time and enjoy this conversation that I had with Wesley? Well, good morning to Wesley Berger. Hi, Wesley.
Hello, good morning.
How are you doing? How's the family hanging in there with everything that's going on in the world today?
Doing very well. We're hanging in there very well. We're still working, both of us, and we have a really small in-home daycare that Corson's still going to, and they're doing an awesome job. And yeah, everything's honestly pretty good, all things considered.
So I was trying to recall exactly when you were at PLC as one of our worship associates. You know, you and Paul worked, hand in glove for almost 2 years together. And so if I have it right, it was like September of 2016 through July of 2018. Does that sound about right?
I think it was October, but even so.
Okay, right. Yeah. So we were right in there. And of course, while you were there, you made a lasting impression on our entire congregation. And so I think this is going to be a real blessing for everybody as they are able to watch and see your face again and hear your voice and catch up with you. So appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. So just give us a snapshot of your life since you left PLC in 2018. So Amanda was in the Marine Corps, and then her service time was done, and you all, for understandable reasons, picked up and moved back to where you're from, and back in the Midwest. And so fill in the blanks for us. What's Amanda doing these days? What are you doing? How did you get there? And of course, fill us in on the family dynamic too.
Yeah. So Amanda, she finished her time in the Marines, and I don't know if anyone remembers, not just kind of like all the creepy fire stuff that was going on at that time when we were getting ready to leave.
I do remember that.
But we had this huge, we had the death in the family that rushed the plane tickets. And so it was like she flew home with Corson. And then I drove one of our cars, drove from California to Minnesota. And then the same week I flew back and then drove a second car from California to Minnesota. And we crash landed, like we were at one place, another place, her dad's place in Sioux Falls for a minute. And then we wound up in the Twin Cities. She started a job almost immediately with Cargill, which she's doing executive administrative stuff. So she's not, directly in charge of, protein division or all the things that they do. But she deeply supports their executives with attending and helping facilitate all their meetings and all their events and their calendars, and is actually a pretty big role in the lives of these people who, from a structure hierarchy standpoint are pretty big people. And so she's doing a really great job with that. Corson is 2.5. He's amazing. He is going to a really a lottery winning like miracle little daycare right now that he's in with this amazing woman. And he loves that, and he's learning a lot, and we're going through all the weird things, and we're like potty training him and stuff, but he's so smart, and he learns more every single day, and he just is so weird to see him start to become a person with a personality,
Yeah.
and not just a little like larva that you're taking care of. Anyway,
So how old is Corson now?
so about 2.5.
Okay. And does he look more like you or look more like Mama?
I am really bad with stuff like this. He now has her eyes, but I think in pretty much all other ways he's more like me.
Okay. How about personality?
To anyone's
Well, you guys, I think I've seen a picture recently. You guys have basically the same haircut, so it looks good.
yeah.
What?
He is a mix of both of us personality wise.
Okay.
It's funny the way he is like food motivated on some things, and the way he's really stubborn on some things is, yeah, it's funny to see ourselves in him, and even at times where we're frustrated, it's impossible not to laugh at.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre looking in like a half mirror of each of us.
And that's the fun part of parenthood, is to look at your little child and see like all the really cool things, and then to be able to identify the cool and the great and the smart, and say, that's the best of me. And then you see all of the stuff that they get in trouble for, and then you can say, well, honey, that's the best in you. So
yeah, there's some narcissism in having a child that's just like you, because like those are all things I love about you.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Oh,
Well, you and Amanda and Corson are going to be welcoming a new addition to your family. So tell us how that's going. Catch us up.
We are going along well and quite far and quite fast. So April 20th is a scheduled delivery.
Okay.
Last time, we shared that we had some complications with Corson, but they were able to do everything wonderfully at the last minute and do the emergency delivery. This time we're going in for a planned delivery. Isaiah Shepherd Berger will be Corson's little brother and our second boy, and we're really excited. And honestly, it's just been such a different experience, if any of you can believe, between naval medicine and having really great insurance and being able to go and see these people that we love, and this person specifically, that just makes Amanda feel so comfortable and so informed, and it's wonderful. And I've been to a lot of the appointments, and we couldn't be luckier. There's a little bit of trepidation with what is it going to be like to have a baby in a hospital at this crazy weird time where, the medical industry in general is just not in disarray, but I mean, oh my goodness, the precautions and the efforts that are going into things, So, I mean, definitely be praying for us in that way, but I think we're going to get it figured out, and I think everything is going to go well, and we're just trusting that we're going to be
good.
taken care of.
So is there anything about the name Isaiah Shepherd? Tell us about how you came up with that name.
I fought Amanda so hard on so many names this time. And it's funny because Isaiah, obviously biblical significance. I like the sound of the name. At first, there's something about it that I was just so, I don't know. I couldn't hear it. I was like, I don't like it. I don't want it. And then Shepherd is a name where it's less like shepherd, like, like the thing, the shepherd. And Shepherd, Shepard, is just a name, whether it's like a middle name or a last name, that we've seen echoed through tons of different things, whether it be like shows or stories or things that we've liked. And it just felt good. And I'm like a phonics person. I don't know if that's the right word, but like Courtney had a certain sound to it that I gravitated to and stuck with. And then something about Isaiah Shepherd is giving me this same like just rhythmic, positive agitation. I don't know, when I think about it. And so, yeah, it's just a name that we really like and we agreed on. And the biggest victory was just agreeing. But yeah, I think it's going to be significant, and I think it's still simple enough. And so we like it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, congratulations, and definitely keep us in the loop, because we'll want to welcome Isaiah with you. You said April 20th?
Yes, sir.
April 20th. All right. Well, Wesley, you told us a little bit about the family and Corson and Amanda. So tell us about what you're doing and where you're doing it and who you're doing it with.
Yeah. So when I arrived to PLC, when I first moved out to California. Obviously, I credit a huge part of that whole happening to just the relationship I was very quickly and briefly able to form with you because of your backgrounds here at Redeemer in Minnesota. And that kind of is something that I had spent, 5 or 6 years at Redeemer before coming out to California. I didn't grow up in the church. I randomly got connected with the church here and kind of just started building up more and more responsibility over time. Around the time we were planning on leaving California, and actually I don't want to misquote this, but I think I was in a meeting with you getting ready to talk about leaving as Pastor John Newald from Redeemer was trying to talk to you about an issue about needing a worship leader. And it was some very proximal thing like that, I remember, and maybe not
Yeah.
exactly, but I got in touch with John Newald and I did some interviews and some talking before I had actually departed, but obviously well after the time we had decided to leave. And Eric
What?
McIntyre, who was worship leader here at Redeemer for years, was just feeling a pull into a different place, into a different thing. And so he was trying to create a process that would allow him to withdraw from his leadership here at Redeemer. And the solution ended up being me coming in.
Let me give you a break for just a minute, Wesley, and let me give a
Yeah.
little background for any of our listeners at our church who may not know you or may not know the story or the connection. But you're right. I mean, I did serve Redeemer in Fridley for 9 years before coming to PLC in 2007. We got connected to you through John Newald, who is the senior pastor. John and I were associates together at Redeemer, and John is one of my dearest friends. And John called me up one day and said, "Hey, you got to find a place for this guy, newly married. His wife's a Marine. See what you can do." He put us in touch. So even though we had been at the same church together, we weren't there at the same time, so I didn't know you.
Right.
And so I
Right.
was out for a board meeting that I had with our national churches, and I scheduled a time with you. We grabbed coffee. I think it was at Caribou in Coon Rapids, if I'm recalling that correctly. And we had a conversation, and I said, "Call me when you get into town." You called me, and the rest is history. And you were with us for almost 2 years. And so that was one
Yeah.
of those great connections. And you were right. I remember we were having lunch, I think at Ballast Point, when that, or maybe that's where you told me that you're about to have a baby. I think
Oh, I
Ballast
think
Point was the
that's true.
baby
I think that's right.
conversation. There was probably maybe it was Stone Brewery up in Escondido or
Yeah,
somewhere.
Paul was there, so that didn't surprise me.
Yeah, that's right. If it was Paul Schwab hockey, it was probably up in Stone and Escondido. Yeah. So anyway, long story short is we've just had these crazy connections. It was beyond just serendipitous. It was definitely the hand of the Lord as I see it from PLC standpoint. And then just to see where and how and why, you ended up back in the Twin Cities, ended up being just a natural fit back with Redeemer, having had a couple of years experience at PLC, to then be the natural successor to Eric, who is one of the top worship leaders, in my opinion, in
Absolutely.
all of LCMC, our Lutheran Congregations of Mission for Christ.
And
And
what I
so,
want to make very clear is that the incredible circumstances of the opportunity. It's hard for me to say something like I replaced Eric or I even succeeded Eric. The staff at Redeemer and the board created this period of time where I actually spent a full year on staff with Eric upon coming back, to where we had this super long and successful osmosis of leadership and knowledge and wisdom and all these things that we were able to do over the course of that year. And it was I cannot speak my gratitude or my praises for that decision enough, because by the time he was ready to move on, which he found his position with the Masters Institute that has their offices here, by that time we had been allowed to make that transition just beyond natural. And at no point was it anything but amicable and an encouraging bond and relationship. And I think really, truly, besides my gratitude to Eric for just who he is and his leadership, that period of time that we were allowed together, I will forever be grateful for that time.
that's an amazing encouragement, Wesley. And that's one of those stories, and I'm going to have to get with John Newald on this too. That's one of those stories that just has to get out there about transitions and leadership transitions and how important those are. I mean, we've got so many challenges just in the church in general. aside from the current realities of not being able to gather in worship spaces and things like that, but
Yeah.
just, the ages of our congregations, the ages of many of our pastors who are going to be retiring, and then the leadership transitions that are going to be, I mean, I've been a part of something like that in the last 7 years. It's a challenging thing. And so there's a lot of encouragement and a lot of lessons that can be learned. So thanks for encouraging us with that
Of
as
course.
well. So tell us a little bit about your side stuff. I mean, you're a music producer, you're a singer and an instrumentalist, and you are either working behind the scenes on a project or you're doing your own projects. Just give us a sense of what's keeping you busy these days.
Yeah, so I have continued doing that. It's been a little bit of a wave back and forth as things pick up, and I mean we all know if you call church a full-time position, there are times of the year where it's a 30-hour a week job and times of the year where it's a 60-hour a week job, and that's just the way it goes. And so obviously it's ebbed and flowed a little more for me as opposed to when I was with you guys as a part-time associate, but I've kept up on it. I've been continuing working with some of my friends who are just songwriters. I've been continuing working with some of my friends who are sort of, the brains behind different bands and projects that I just participate from, and we create, but we don't necessarily perform and tour and things extensively. One currently that I'm working on right now, I, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. If it was, I think it was after I came back to Minnesota, I released a project called Chronicles with a friend of mine, Davey, who lives in Utah. And that's kind of like it's like a big, wild, wacky, heavy music storybook is kind of what that project is. And we're actually going to do an entire second sort of like heavy progressive novel album type thing. And that's coming up soon. I'm really excited for that. Otherwise, I've had this, I don't know what you would call it, maybe not a revelation, but this period of finally buckling down and releasing worship music or music in the style of contemporary worship. It's so weird. It's not like anyone was ever holding me back from doing it. I just think there was a certain switch that flipped at one point where it's like I fully gave myself permission to say, no, I'm not spending any energy hiding this part of me anyway. So why don't I start producing and creating and, expelling or whatever the word is, material of this stuff that's been my heart for, I mean, I haven't been alive that long, but literal still decades. I grew up with this music, with this style and worshiping and being led in worship. And I have a lot more buzzing around in my head and my heart of that stuff that I know will take shape soon. Um, I mean, you take a guy in full-time ministry with 2 kids and ask him to find the time to write an album, and it gets a little sketchy,
Yep.
in there. But it's just something that keeps me going. It's something that I could have the most negative and de-energizing week, but to sit down with just music in worship to the Lord that I know came from my heart and my mind, that is so energizing, and I'm so grateful to have that element inside of me. And so more of that is definitely coming as well.
Yeah, well, that's great news. I think a lot of people are really glad to hear that. I know that there's you're such a humble guy, Wesley, and I think with your talent that many of us recognize, you could very easily fall on the extreme opposite side of that. And I remember just in prayer one morning, going back, probably a couple of years at least now, where we were putting together this series of messages at PLC, and we were going to, after Easter, we were going to concentrate on just that word joy. And I remember the Lord specifically saying, commission Wesley to write a song. And I think part of that, if I remember, comes from some of our discussions you and I had about this very thing. You're like, yeah, people told me I should write music before for church, but I just haven't done it yet. And I don't know if that was part of it or not, but I just remember that moment. And then
Yeah.
I remember, gosh, just hearing what you called a demo track, and you gave it to me. I downloaded it on my phone. I had to go somewhere. It was my day off. And I remember putting it in my car and listening to it. I had to pull over. I was just going up the street. I had to pull over. I was just so overcome with emotion and joy. I'm getting emotional about it now. In fact, I'm going to lower the screen on my end, but I just remember that just being one of those pinnacle moments. And then when our worship team, along with you leading it, released that, and we shared it with everybody, the reaction of people. And so I knew at that time there were great things to come for you, and I think those things are just beginning. So again, thank you for the gift that you gave to us as a congregation. I think if I were able to take live questions right now, I can't, but because we're recording this. But I think people would
Not yet.
probably ask me, "Hey, ask Wesley if they sing that song at his church." So Wesley, do you still do Joy at your church? Do you still do it at Redeemer, or do you know of other churches that are doing it?
First of all, I have to say thank you, just for all the extremely kind words, but also, to say thank you for that opportunity. There was something. This is difficult to word. I don't think I was seeking validation as like the key turning to get me started on that, but there was something very humbling and very validating by being requested to begin with. And I would definitely say I attribute that to the confidence I eventually had to recently release more music. So I want to thank you for that. And it was such a great time, and all the people who put in the hard work to make that song an in-person reality for worship. That's a feeling like nothing, that I had experienced up until that point. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
What I
you.
did actually, yeah, I took the song, and, the nature of the song originally is this big kind of anthemic, bombastic, exciting thing, but the place that the song comes from really is, it isn't just here's the frosting on top, here's skimming off the top. It's like joy some seasons comes from a darker place, an understanding of what it's like to have no joy, or to be more desolate, or and I feel like I had only really ever captured sort of half of the real song. And so what I then had an opportunity to do is, of course, when I released this EP, and I remember I even got in contact with you about, hey, I really want to use this, I want to transform it, and you were really gracious with that. So I took the same song, and then, of course, turned it into more of this yang to the yin of not a dark, but a much more reflective and pensive version of the same song. And so that secondary version of the song has served us on a couple different occasions, that I have been cautious and selective about, because what I really want to avoid is, I wrote these songs and I'm in charge, so guess what, we're doing these songs. Like, you know what I mean? But no, so yeah, the song has continued to live on and has continued to serve and bless people, and I say that and it feels weird to be like, I've blessed people, but no,
Yeah.
I've been just really, really humbled by the response and the continued life that the song has. So it's a really long answer, but I mean, yeah.
No, the one thing I've always admired about artists such as yourself and other people who have this type of talent and the ability to look in and look at the world just so much differently than I'm such a linear, sequential person and thinker, that to get outside of those lines and to color a little bit, it's hard. I need people like you around me to help me see things. So just your own description of that bombastic joy, anthemic. I would never use words like that. I'm not smart enough. But then, but I have described, and I've heard that version of joy on your latest EP, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I've described it to people as I just the ability and the creativity to take something like we experienced it at PLC, and I know other churches that were blessed to have that song and use in worship to this high energy, raise the roof in celebration of the joy that God gives us. But then to take it, and the way I've described it is as a ballad. You've made a ballad out of it,
Yeah.
and you've made it very contemplative. And just to hear your description from the artist who created it is, it's just gold. And so now, I can't wait to get off of this call and go back and listen to that song now. But and for everybody who is listening or watching this, we will give you a link to Wesley's new EP. So tell us about this new EP. And I know you've got other things you got to do today, and I'm taking up your time. But tell us about your EP. Tell us about how it came about, and then I'm going to ask you to sing the title track from that for us, and I think that's really going to bless
Yeah.
people as well.
So the EP, again, for those of you who aren't familiar with the terminology, is just sort of a shorter collection of songs than a full long play album. So as opposed to 40 or 50 minutes, it's more like 20, 25 minutes. It's 5 songs. And it's fun because one of the tunes on the 5-song EP is something that I could almost say I finished writing it like 10 years ago, and it just like sat bouncing around in my head, and it changed form and changed shape a number of times, all the way up till, you know, one of the tracks on the song, I had finished writing it as I was recording the song, because I just couldn't get anything out of it until I got into the feel of it, you know. And so it's this hugely weird like bookends almost of where I've been and what I've done so far. But the title track, which, you know, is obviously the name of the EP itself, "The Art of You," it I've been I'm trying to remember if I had this discussion with you, but I've been kind of labeled occasionally as a scriptural cliche. In that
What do you mean by that?
feel like I feel like I walk around with this huge like background and knowledge and ability to just be like, oh, that's in scripture, it says this. And yet someone will be like, yeah, where was that? And I'll just sort of say, I mean, I know it's in there. And
Yeah,
I do that
gotcha.
from time to time. And so I had this sense, I started writing these songs and all these other lyrics. And the thing with "The Art of You" is there's a bit in Ephesians, I think it's Ephesians 2:8, and I'm just making an example of myself right now. I think it's like Ephesians 2:8 or something like that, but it, you know, talks about God viewing us as his masterwork, and his work of art. And there's all these different translations that I dove through. But I was writing this song about feeling like, you know, all these different things are like pages in a story, or they're like, you know, bevels and curves on a sculpture, or colors of a painting, or however it applies to your specific artistry. And I was like, okay, but what is, you know, the maker, and what's the relationship of the maker to the creation? And it just, I don't know, I just spent time in prayer and in song. Sometimes writing songs is like, ooh, I have this great lyric, let me whip out my fancy songwriting journal. And then other times writing songs is like, I'm at a piano just like, like just trying to figure out like rhythms and sounds that are like feeling like something. What's the word that you use? It's not like the glossolalia or anything like that, but
Yeah,
it's like just these
yeah,
words and moans and groans,
yeah,
and they're worshipful.
yeah,
And to be able to harness them into a thing with actual words, and that's kind of how
yep,
some of this one came together. And then I started it just like a cycle of like how I feel and what I know and what's in scripture and what I can do in worship. And those things just like spin around like tumbling in a dryer, you know, until a song comes out. And so I also use the disclaimer that, you know, some of it, I would not be offended if someone listened to some of these songs and would say, that's not really a song I can worship to. That just sounds pretty personal to you. Which is why, you know, maybe part of why I'm not really trying to push them solely as here is my congregational worship offering.
yeah,
Because I know that some of this is I'm trying to talk about a story between me and God, and it's intentional and it's worshipful, but maybe it's not the words that your heart is singing, and that, you know, it doesn't offend you,
yeah.
it doesn't
Wow.
bother me. But so yeah, it just that whole process and that whole thing, not like I am the only one to have ever figured it out, but just it was a real life wrestle and a real life conversation about why, as a creation, my creation, then back to the creator, like has value, and what, you know, just that process being
Yeah,
valuable and something that I saw worth pursuing. So, I mean, I don't know if I could frame it much better than that. But that's about what it.
yeah. No, thanks for doing that. So, can you tell us how can we get a hold of this? How can people listen to it? And just, you didn't ask me to do this, but I want to do it. I mean, people can go on and listen to live streaming for free through Spotify and different things. But how do we bless you as an artist to help you, you know, make a living and raise 2 kids and all of that fun stuff? So tell us how we can do both of those
I
things.
really appreciate that. I appreciate
Yeah,
that. Thank you. And, you know, that is such a weird thing of today's landscape when it comes to artists or independent artists is if you're not somehow, somewhere giving it away for free, you're not even relevant. But if you are giving it away for free, then how are you? Yeah, you know, it's such a weird landscape to
yeah,
navigate. But if you just type in Wesley Berger, The Art of You, I can almost guarantee you it comes up anywhere. It comes up on Spotify and iTunes and Apple Music and Google and Amazon. And, you know, like it's a pretty big distribution effort that I've gone through. And that was even part of the process of, you know, doing copyright and, you know, representation through a huge organization called BMI, and all these different bases I had to cover and boxes I had to check. So you can literally almost find it anywhere digitally. There's there wasn't a move to do hard copies just because it was such an initial offering, a first try sort of a thing,
Yeah.
and maybe I would rethink that in the future. But if you do want to try to support me more directly, which I would be super humbled and super grateful for, obviously there's still the difference on many platforms between buying and streaming. So if you had the option to buy it on iTunes or Google or what have you, that would obviously come back to me. There's a more independent website that is called Bandcamp. And what that is that's a place where I can personally go and upload and represent myself and deal more directly with fans or friends or customers. I don't really like referring to it as that. But so if you went to wesleyberger.bandcamp.com, I have the EP there. I have I have a totally instrumental EP there. So it's the same music, but without words, whether that's just for you to listen because you don't like hearing me sing, or if it's for you to sing along to, I don't know. And there's some other fun goodies on that page, and I continue to upload some things there. So that is the most direct way where you could say, I want to know where my support is going, not how many hands will my dollar pass through before 2 cents gets put into Wesley's pocket.
And that's the
So
Bandcamp.
that's the approach.
Yeah, that's the
Correct.
Bandcamp specifically. Okay, so
Correct.
in just a moment, Wesley, and I'll let you take a moment to get ready. You're going to bless us with the title track from The Art of You, the EP. Let me just give the opportunity to thank you for being a part of this with me today, and for just
thank you. I miss you guys.
Catching up. Well, we miss you for sure. And I want to make sure that my folks know that I'm going to put all of these links that you've mentioned, I'm going to put them on the email attachment that's going to announce this video podcast. Okay. And we'll put all of those links for my folks, and just encourage my people to bless you with, especially as they're listening to your music, and to make sure that we're contributing to our artists who are doing things like this, and give us an expression that I know that I couldn't express this to the Lord without people like you leading us, Wesley. So thank you for doing that. So anyway, so we'll close out with this song. I know it's a live version on streaming internet, and so we might have a few quality issues, but maybe this will just be a tease for people to go on and actually download your EP, and they can be blessed to it, especially as we're in this time of being secluded in our homes. Actually, we are in California. You haven't gotten that mandate yet in Minnesota. I know you're in your office. But anyway, thanks, Wesley. And this is, I'll let you introduce the song, and then we'll sign off.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you guys again so much. It's great to be in contact with you. This is a song, The Art of You.
Times my eyes just couldn't see that it was your hands turning the pages in my story. Still you're writing all of me, penned in love by you. All that you are and everything you do is the song on my heart, the melody of your truth. 'Cause everything I am is the art of you. Yes, everything I am is the art of you. Jesus, you've forgiven me for all my many failures and the times that I refuse to see is the art of you. Everything I am is the art of you. With the hands of a sculptor and the love of a father, you have reformed my nature, all for good, all for good. With a heart for my future and the love of a father, you fixed the pieces that were left for dead, misunderstood. With the hands of a sculptor and the love of a father, you have reformed my nature, all for good, all for good. All you learn as you taken, but I'll never be forsaken. All you made and you shaping, everything just as it should be. All that you've seen, the darkness that I've walked through, you still looked at me, said I am the one you choose. 'Cause everything I am is the art of you. All that you are and everything you do is the song on my heart, the melody of your truth. Oh, 'cause everything I am is the art of you. Yeah. Lord, everything I am is the art of you. Yeah. There you go. That's what it is.
Wesley Berger, The Art of You. Thanks again, Wesley. Blessings to you and your family. That's awesome.
Hope to
Love
see
you.
guys again soon.
Yeah.